So, if anything, Larry Stylinson is a real life lesson in just how much first loves can be a pervasive influence on a person for the rest of their life, or at least well into their adulthood, when it comes to other relationships. Now, most people don't end up with their first real love just because it's not like back in the day when people married right out of high school. And people tend to move around more now, go away for college. There's just more varieties of experience that can expand one's horizons and their perspectives and allow people to experience life in ways that you can refine what you like and don't like. So there are still those cases of people who do meet their person at a really young age and they grow together, and it's not that it's impossible, it's just we aren't as restricted by geography and by information. So, but nonetheless, regardless if you're with your first person ever or if you have that memory of a bittersweet romance that ran its course, why is it that first loves have such an impact? And kind of what does Larry show us all about how first loves can be pervasive? So, many of us can recall our first meaningful romantic connection and that intense, all consuming experience that seemed to rewrite our understanding of human connection. And while we often celebrate current relationships, there's something uniquely powerful about first love that stays with us, and sometimes, often for a lifetime. So, let's start with what makes first love so distinct. The late Helen Fisher, Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist at Rutgers University, had extensively studied the brain chemistry of love, and her research shows that the first romantic attachments coincide with crucial development periods in our brains. So during adolescence and early adulthood, our brains are undergoing significant changes in the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for decision making, personality development, and social behavior. When intense romantic feelings occur during this formative period, the neural pathways being created are particularly strong and resilient. So if you look back at the ages that Harry and Louis were put together in the band and the rest of the boys, they were 16 to 18, which is right smack in adolescence. And even close friendships formed during these developmental periods can sometimes blur the line between platonic and romantic connection. And this has been observed in numerous celebrity friendships where fans speculate about deeper bonds, like the intense friendship between One Direction bandmates Harry Styles and Louis Tomlinson that many fans interpreted as potentially romantic. So I'm talking from the really objective perspective. Now, wherever you stand on is Larry Stylinson real? Is it not? There's still lessons on it. And remember, because of the isolation of fame at that age, amplified by the fishbowl of it, there's a very unique experience that's even more unique than having gone to high school together. And the identity formation at that time for the band and having these forces sort of telling you what your persona is, it sets up a really interesting dynamic. So, regardless of the nature of such relationships, whether it's romantic or platonic, psychology helps us understand why these early intense connections leave such profound impressions. And it's because they occur when our identity is still forming, creating an association between our sense of self and that other person. Now, the timing of first love is critical because it does coincide with the identity formation process, and it creates a situation where another person becomes intertwined with our developing sense of self. So even years later, reconnecting with this person can trigger access to the self you were becoming at the time. And then this explains why reuniting with someone from this period of life, whether it's a former romantic partner or an intensely close friend, can feel like you're accessing a part of yourself that has been dormant. And it can also set up this comparison where it seems like nobody else can awaken that part of you. So another fascinating aspect of first love is what psychologists call imprinting, and it's similar to how baby ducks imprint on their first moving um, object that they see. So humans can develop attachment patterns based on early significant relationships. And it's Dr. John Bowlby's attachment theory that suggests that these early bonds create internal working models that guide how we approach relationships throughout life. So that's really interesting. So keep that little concept in mind, how the initial spark can affect how we engage with other relationships for the rest of our life. So a first love relationship essentially creates a blueprint that subsequent relationships may be measured against, and sometimes consciously, but often unconsciously. So the other part of this is that these formative relationships, they create emotional anchors, and the intensity isn't just about the other person, it's about who we were becoming alongside them. And keep in mind, Harry at 16, look how much he changed during those years. Like in even 1 or 2 years after the band was formed, he physically looked different. And yeah, that's the power of puberty for you. But think of just what is going on in the brain that is the driver of all these physical changes as well as emotional changes, and all that accelerated experiencing that they were having. Like it's very hard to find someone that was your peer that was experiencing the exact same thing you were. And that was a very unique experience. So that can almost fuse your sense of identity and who you are with that other person that you're in this intense bond with. And this can create a unique bond that persists even when people take different life paths. And then this will bring us to an interesting phenomenon researchers have observed, and it's the durability of these bonds despite separation or life changes. And there was a 2022 study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships that found that over 70% of participants reported that their first significant romantic relationship continued to influence their emotional responses and relationship expectations decades later. So these are people that were private citizens, were, they weren't under the public scrutiny, and they were living more of a normal kind of life where they could go out and do things and experience things, make mistakes, and not have to worry about the press getting hold of it. Not not the same thing with Harry and Louis, right? Um, and they also came to fame with the rise of the social media, and just a lot of their fame is credited to that. So we all know how social media can go viral really quickly. And so this persistence explains why childhood friendships or early romantic connections can sometimes be rekindled after years or even decades apart with surprising emotional intensity. And it's the neural pathways established during these formative relationships that remain accessible even when they're dormant. So that is a that's been studied quite a bit about how suddenly they just go right back to where you left off, and there's a reason why in the brain patterning that happens. And the interesting part is that the research shows that these lasting bonds aren't necessarily about perfection or idealization. So, Dr. Robert Sternberg has a triangular theory of love, which suggests that complete love includes intimacy, passion, and commitment. And first love often emphasizes intimacy and passion, creating a powerful emotional cocktail. Because keep in mind the kind of hormones going on at the time, right? Even when the commitment component might be underdeveloped due to being young and also the circumstances of being young. So, where does this leave us when it comes to the public fascination with celebrity relationships? Well, it often stems from this universal experience. When fans had speculated about the deep connection between these very public figures, Harry and Louis, whether they were former bandmates or co-stars, like it happens in there's other shipping, but this shipping, it's enduring after 15 years. It's quite interesting. What the social psychologists and psychologists say is that what happens when there's this collective that's like rooting for these two is that they could be projecting their understanding of these profound early bonds into this sort of public figure. And the phenomenon of shipping in fan communities where fans hope for or imagine romantic relationships between celebrities often focuses on pairs who demonstrate visible chemistry or emotional connection. And this is reflecting our our collective emotional understanding that certain bonds transcend typical relationships and create lasting impressions. But what happens when these formative relationships end or change form? Well, the psychologist Dr. Nancy Kalish who studied lost love reunions for over 25 years, had some interesting research. And that research showed that when people reconnect with a significant early relationship partner, the emotional intensity will often return surprisingly intact, which is what I said. It just, they pick up where they leave off. And so, what this is suggesting is that the neural and emotional pathways formed during these relationships, they just remain accessible, and it's accessible throughout life. And it's a unique emotional signature that can reactivate even after long separations because the brain encodes emotional memories differently than ordinary memories. And the amygdala and the hippocampus, parts of the brain, work together to create particularly vivid and lasting memories during periods of high arousal. It's exactly what's happening during intense first love experiences. And so, with all that said, compound that with the touring, selling out stadiums, making all these media appearances, the blockbuster fame. I mean, yeah, that would be really hard to recreate with someone else, even if it was someone else who had a very similar experience with their own group or TV show or whatever. They weren't walking that path with you at the time, and they were not the age you were. They were whatever age they were, but they didn't know you when you were that age. So there's something about having gone through that with that person and experiencing that when you were that age together. So it it goes to show that maybe that's why people are so readily able to believe that Larry has prevailed all these years, because actually there's research that would actually suggest that that is true. And when you forbid something, you make it either taboo, or you make it the forbidden fruit, and like all the more will someone like really want to hold on to it. And what else does the research say? Uh, okay, so first, when you recognize the lasting impact of early relationships, they can help you understand your own patterns and preferences. And those who study relationship psychology suggest that understanding one's relationship imprints can help make one more conscious about choices in current and future relationships. The second thing, too, is it explains why certain connections will feel irreplaceable, and the unique combination of timing, neurological development, and emotional intensity will create bonds that simply cannot be replicated in the same way later in life. So, of course, if Larry ever came out, people would be like, I told you so, because you know what? The research would actually be supportive of this enduring love. Um, and then also, I think the importance of Larry also underlies the validity of the cultural significance we place on first love, because it's been celebrated in literature, film. Human culture has always recognized this singular, potent nature of these early connections, and they're not just this sentimental nostalgia, but it is a formative life shaping experience. Which means if it did go really super sour, that's something to look at, um, because the human brain is built to remember, and first love takes advantage of a critical period in the development of that brain. And but it creates memories and patterns that can last a lifetime. So then understanding this does not diminish your current relationship, just helps us recognize the beauty and the complexity of human connections across our lifespan.